Good news for UFC 299 fans. Dustin Poirier, Benoit St. Denis back on. If you missed my video earlier, Poirier tweeting out that the fight is off with little clarification. And then Ariel Helwani, of course, coming through and saying that the contract wasn't signed. There was a contract issue. We talked about this in the last video, but Poirier now saying, sorry, folks, I jumped the gun. I couldn't get a hold of my manager for a few days. I spoke with him and Hunter. Misunderstanding on my part. Fight is still on. See you March 9th in Miami. No one's believing this. Look, and Ariel sort of clarifies this after the fact. I'm not here to rag on Dustin Poirier. Like, I get what he did, but Ariel kind of gives some more clarification here. Ariel Helwani says, no, Dustin finally going public with what he wanted. That's the business. Good on him. Doesn't change the fact that up until an hour ago, he didn't agree. Remember, he broke the story, no one else. And when this was announced about a month ago, he hadn't agreed. No one is denying that Benoit St. Denis agreed, which his team confirmed, and this isn't the only fight that falls under this umbrella. Ariel is right about this. I mean, this happens far too often where fights are put together by the UFC. I mentioned in the last video about Aljamain Sterling and Sean O'Malley, which was not official when they announced it, and then they figured out the terms after the fact. So yeah, I mean, I think two things are kind of I think key in this entire situation. The first thing is that, I mean, I personally think Dustin Poirier should have mentioned ahead of all this that the contracts weren't signed. I think people just assumed they were. I think that way it gives people a better understanding of what sort of has happened and everything else. And I guess you're still going to get those moronic fans who say, oh, he's scared to fight Benoit St. Denis. That's why the contract isn't signed. No, it's probably because he wants to make sure he's getting paid what he's worth. Because like I mentioned in the last video, Benoit St. Denis has so much to gain from this fight. Dustin Poirier does not have a lot. I mean, Poirier really, a win here over Benoit St. Denis would just sort of keep him in the same spot he's in. St. Denis, it's a big jump up from Matt Frivola getting to fight him. So let's get that out of the way right now in terms of Poirier, trying to figure out terms with the UFC and everything else. And I mean, again, this is just a common thing that keeps happening where the UFC puts a fight announcement out. They want to make sure that it puts pressure on the fighters to sign because they know this is what's going to happen. The public perception is, oh, the fighter's scared to fight or whatever, right? I mean, this type of stuff we've seen over and over again. So it's just sad that it kind of has to come to this level where you get fans freaking out, because an hour ago, if you had tickets to UFC 299 and your favorite fighter's Dustin Poirier, I felt bad for you because it appeared like the fight was off. So Poirier has to do this. Now, look, again, no one's buying this, that he couldn't get a hold of his manager for a couple days. And there was a misunderstanding. That's not what happened. They probably gave him a contract. This is my hunch. I don't have 100% proof, but my hunch is they gave him a contract offer. Poirier's like, no, this doesn't make any sense. And they're like, well, take it or leave it. And Dustin's like, you know what? I'm going to go to Twitter and let the public know this fight's off. And then they're going to really see you as the leverage here. And obviously they came to the right terms. And this is what I said in the last video too. It probably came down to money or something. And the UFC was trying to maybe strong arm Poirier. And Poirier said, no, I'm the A side here, not Benoit St. Denis. You got to give me what I want. And obviously they've come to terms here. So I'm just glad this is all figured out. I have a lot of stuff planned for Benoit St. Denis and Dustin Poirier from the pros picks too. I'm going to do an early look on this soon. I'm just glad the fight's still on because it makes a ton of sense for both guys in terms of, and I know I just said Poirier doesn't have much to gain, but it makes sense in terms of the overall scheme of the lightweight division. You've got Benoit St. Denis, who has looked incredible. He's looked outstanding. Let's look at that resume right now. Since moving down to lightweight, he's undefeated. He's been destroying his opponents. I mean, there's no doubt about it. This is the step up we would like to see. If we were just treating this as a sport and not just pure entertainment, this fight makes a ton of sense, right? You've got St. Denis, who's, relatively young. He's an up-and-comer. He's from France, which is a market they've been going to, Paris, that is. They've been going there the last couple fights. He's on a roll. He's a highlight machine. This is a good opportunity for him to sort of prove his worth. And on the flip side for Dustin Poirier, see, Tapology still hasn't updated the fact that the fight's still back on. But Poirier, I mean, he's had his opportunities at the title. He's, had big opportunities that haven't panned out. Last fight against against Gaethje, he gets knocked out in the fight. So it's kind of like he's got to take this to kind of stay in that spot of being a contender here. So, again, credit to him for taking this matchup because, again, St. Denis has way more has way less to lose here than Dustin Poirier does. So I'm just glad the fight is, again, put back on here. And from just a matchmaking perspective, it makes a ton of sense. But there's also that business side where, Poirier, again, has, helped the UFC out a lot. He's fought the who's who in the weight class. Fans got to recognize that. Like people saying, kick Dustin Poirier out of the UFC and all this stuff. Like, what do you, like, imagine working at a job for, I don't know how many years. Let's say you're working at a job. Let's use a comparison here. You've worked at a job for, I don't know, 20 years or something like that. And you've put the time in and all that. And all of a sudden they're giving a promotion to a guy who started, like 2 years ago. and they're giving him more opportunities, you'd be upset by that. It's kind of like the same thing here. Poirier's put the time into the UFC. You shouldn't be treated as someone who's, whether they lowballed him on the deal or what happened. I'm not entirely sure here, but yeah, it's just good to see that they've been able to figure this out. And I just wish the UFC wouldn't have to do this where they're strong arming fighters by announcing fights. And listen, I mentioned this in the other video as well. Like, I get the UFC having to put announcements out because they got to sell tickets. They've got an ESPN partnership where they need to get fights rolling out. They can't be stalling if things are taking a while. So I understand that. I just think then you're not getting all this drama of where Poirier, did Poirier even delete the other tweet? Yeah, he's still got the tweet up here. My fight's off. You should probably delete that. Maybe put a screen grab of the old one and put it in here or whatever. But yeah, I jumped the gun and I couldn't get a hold of my manager. I think his manager's Tiki Gozin, if I'm not mistaken. He reps a bunch of other fighters like Brian Ortega and who else? He's got a few under his banner. But yeah, I couldn't get a hold of my manager. I have to say the fight's off. Like, there's a misunderstanding. I don't know. I just think I tend to lean with what Ariel said here, is that, Dustin going public kind of forced the UFC's hand to kind of give into his demands. And, whatever it is for Poirier, I think he deserves it. Like I said, like, he's the A side in this fight. It's not Benoit Saint Denis. Benoit Saint Denis can eventually get there, especially with the win here over Dustin Poirier, but he's got to work his way up. When did Saint Denis get in the UFC? He got in what, like a couple of years ago? 2021 was when he got in the UFC. Dustin Poirier has been in the UFC since, how far back are we going here? We came over from the WEC, but 2011, huge difference, 10-year gap right between the two. So that's got to count for something. Again, like, I understand this as well, but yeah. And then the other thing I'm glad about here, like I said, aside from the fight, the fact that the fight is on, this stupid fan narrative about, oh, he's scared to fight. He's scared to, like, come on, guys. We're still doing this in 2024, saying that Dustin Poirier, a guy who's fought Conor McGregor, he's fought the who's who. Look at this resume of who he's fought. Yeah, Dustin Poirier is really scared to fight someone. Look at this: Gaethje, Chandler, Oliveira, McGregor 2 times. McGregor's got some serious power. Hooker, Holloway, Gaethje again, Pettis, Alvarez. Like, he's fought the who's who. Poirier's a legend, man. So just glad they kind of figured this one out and they got it sorted out and all that stuff. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. What do you think about this whole situation? Do you like the UFC forcing the hand of the fighters by announcing fights ahead of time? Do you think they should kind of chill a little bit before they make like fight announcements and all that? What do you think about what Poirier did here today, which was, like Ariel said, essentially forcing the UFC's hand? Do you think, obviously it worked out for him, but do you like this? Would you rather, like, what do you think of the whole process of what the UFC's been up to as far as putting stuff together? That's something that's very key in my opinion. So that's something I think worth noting in terms of how the UFC is doing their business these days. But I'd love to hear from you. And also, while we're here, since we're talking about this fight, what's your pick? Poirier's the underdog. I get it, because you got Saint Denis, obviously younger, and it's looked really great, and Poirier's coming off a knockout loss, but I wouldn't count Poirier out in this fight. I'm going to do a full breakdown on this coming up here pretty soon, but I think this fight is much closer than a lot of fans think, because this is a lot like Fiziev and Gaethje, where pretty much everyone was picking Fiziev and thought Gaethje was done. And what happened? Gaethje went out there and got the win. So I think the same thing could potentially happen here. But anyways, wanted to do this follow-up video just to kind of get some clarity as to what happened. But I did update the last video with the updated tweet from Dustin Poirier. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @LynchOnSports. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll talk to you guys soon.